there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a technique that I used to use quite a lot when I did mixed media pieces. And basically you can take a background that is really busy and bold and bright and there's a lot going on and easily kind of create a focal point to go in the middle, and that is your card. So today I am going to start by making the backgrounds. But of course, if you have backgrounds hanging around or you want to use them up, then go for gold and use those too. But I am going to kind of have a little bit of fun here. These are the Catherine Paula Party Collection Carnivale, and I am just creating some bold stripes across the page using direct to paper. So nothing special. I'm not worried about these being perfect or perfectly lined up and straight or anything like that. That doesn't matter because we are going to add kind of a lot of things on top of this. And again, when you're creating these backgrounds, everything is kind of optional. Use what you have in your stash to create these really interesting backgrounds, or as I said, if you already have a stash of them, then that's fantastic too. So for this blues and greens card, I'm going to be using the Fiesta Blue and the grass skirt and all that jazz to create these three lines, and I will just repeat them. And then for the oranges and pinkies kind of ones, I used Samba, Be Mine, Coral Cabana, and some Limoncello. Now I chose to use these dye inks today because they are water reactive and because Catherine Paula ink pads in general are pretty juicy, so that was going to work well with my direct to paper technique. I have chosen a couple of stencils here and I just have a damp kitchen towel, and I'm going to pop that through the stencil and just kind of blot it through so that I can see there is lots of moisture going through. I don't want it to be too wet, but that will remove some of the colour from the stencil. And again, you can pick any stencil. All of these things that I'm going to add to these projects here is very optional. So you can do some of them or none of them or do your own ones. And then I'm just going to shift the stencil across a little bit because it is not quite wide enough to go all the way across the card. I wasn't going to line it up. I have the little bit of perfectionist in me wants to have everything lined up nicely, but sometimes you just have to kind of let go a little bit more because honestly these will become the background, and that's what they are. We're creating backgrounds, I guess. So I'm going to do the same thing with the blues and the greens one, and I do try and choose stencils that have kind of bigger openings, not necessarily really big, but just big enough that I can kind of get the damp towel through and you're going to be able to see the pattern. So to begin with, we put ink on and then we are now removing some of the ink, just a little bit, and I'll blot a little bit up, and then I'm going to come back to adding some more different little textures and things for these backgrounds. So this stamp here is the text background stamp. I'm going to pop this on an acrylic block, and then I'm just going to take one of the colors that I used in the original background there. So I don't want to introduce any new colors at this point. I want to use exactly what I've already used, and I'm just stamping little bits of it all over the background. Now you aren't meant to be able to see this super clearly. I just stamp it on. Again, it's just another little texture and you can go any which way you want to. I'm just using up the ink that's left on there. Then I'm going to do the same with the pink one, and I think I chose the kind of more red, maybe the coral color here, Coral Cabana maybe. And again, I'm just doing it completely randomly, and sometimes I find the faster that I do this and the less that I think about it, the better they kind of come out. If I try and plan it too much, they sometimes don't quite come out how I want them to. So sometimes just working fast and not thinking all about it is a good way to go. So this is again another stamp from the same text. It's just got a few, maybe like 10 or so alphabet letters there, and I just stamped on a little bit of that in the same colors. Then I'm coming back in with the same stencils that I used earlier on, except for now I'm going to do some ink blending through them. And I'm using the Samba color, which is again one that I've already used in the background. And I am just using a little makeup sponge because I just have a few. In fact, this is all of the Catherine Paula inks that I have. And so I don't have like a dedicated finger dauber or dedicated blending brushes for these. So I just really use a little piece of makeup sponge, and that works perfectly well for blending through some ink. Then I have this stamp set here, which is the Natural Elements stamp set, and I am just going to add in a couple of little pieces from here. Honestly, if you go through your stash and then just have a look, you want to sort of get different textures, different sizes, different shapes, and you can almost make anything work here for these kind of you know, lots of layers background. It's not really mixed media because I haven't used any other media apart from inks and things, but it's kind of following some of those techniques that I would otherwise use. So I'm just going to pop those around, all around, randomly, all over, upside down, backwards, sideways, just anywhere where I can put them. And then these are my 2 backgrounds finished. Now, this is really fun. There's no rules to these techniques, and that's what I really enjoy, just adding lots of different layers. But now I want to turn these into cards. Now, for this technique, I wanted a kind of big, bold stamp that I was going to use. And I wanted to have lots of open space in the stamp so that you could see that gorgeous background from behind. This stamp platform here is the Press to Impress, and this is the one that I got from Craftstash in the UK, but they also have the US Craftstash site as well. And I'm going to be using this Apple Blossom stamp set. This is a gorgeous big rose. I have used this on quite a few projects before because I really do love this one. And this is a mask that I had previously cut out for a different project. In fact, you saw me do it in a couple of videos ago, and I just always save the masks and pop them back in the back of the stamp set so that I don't have to recut out another one when I come to use it again. Now, just because this stamp is so big, I wanted to make sure at this point that I got a really good impression. So that's why I'm using a stamping platform. I've just tested using a little spot on my card to make sure that all of that ink is dry and the embossing powder is not going to stick anywhere that I haven't dried the ink very well. And then I'm just going to pop my rose where I want it to go, bearing in mind that I'm going to leave room for a sentiment that's going to go down across the bottom. So I am going to put the anti-static powder bag on my piece first, just as a little extra reassurance, just in case any of the oils and things from my hands create sticky spots, or I get some VersaMark on my fingers and then put that on my project. I'm going to ink it up with the VersaMark sticky embossing ink, and then I'm going to do this twice, which is the luxury of having a stamping platform. You don't need to do it twice, but I just sometimes if I think that the stamp's really big and I can see a couple of spots that maybe didn't stamp perfectly, then I'll go back and stamp it again. Then I add some super fine detail white embossing powder. Then I'm going to melt it with my heat gun and you'll see that nice bright white image appear. Now, I mean, even these look gorgeous, but I am going to add my mask so that I can kind of tone down my background. Now, on the right hand side there, you can see that I added some butterflies to the blue one. My videos have been getting a bit longer recently and I like to keep them short and sweet, so I decided to just focus on showing you guys just one of these 2 cards. Now here's the trick. I'm using this unicorn pigment ink. This one is from Hero Arts, and I'm just going to use again a sponge dauber and go all around the outside to tone it down completely. This is a really fun look. If you are good at drawing or doodling on your pages, use a black marker and draw your image, and then do the same technique by adding the white ink around the outside. Now, if you don't have white ink, then you can definitely kind of water down some white acrylic paint and try those sorts of things, or some gesso. All of these things are going to work, and they might just end up slightly different, but I've tried them all and they all work really well. Now I'm going back to this text stamp and I'm stamping some of it in the white pigment ink as well. I must admit that having this unicorn white pigment ink is something that I reach for often, so it is really good to have in your stash. And then once you peel off this gorgeous rose, you can see that it definitely becomes a focal point and the background is pushed to the background kind of as it should be. So I really like this technique. It's not groundbreaking or crazy or new, but it is a really fun one to kind of keep in mind when you have these big, bold backgrounds. Now I'm going to add my little sentiment. So I've got some lawn fawn vellum, and then I have these curly greetings here. And again, you could use so many different occasions for this card. There are lots that would work really well, but for this one I have gone with a Thinking of You one, and I'm going to stamp it in the same VersaMark sticky embossing ink onto the vellum, and then use the same white embossing powder from earlier on, and I'm going to make sure that I've got no little extra little bits and pieces floating around on my vellum, because I don't want to melt those and have little specks everywhere. But this is the main reason why I use the lawn fawn vellum, because I'm able to heat emboss with it. It's a nice decent weight, but it's not too heavy that you can't see through it, so it works well for me. Then I'm just going to trim up the sentiment using my trimmer, and this is where the sentiment is going to go down the bottom underneath that rose, so that's why I left room for it there. Now, if you feel like giving this technique a go, or you've done this one already, I would love to see your projects and your makes. So the best place to do that is over on my Facebook page. We have a really, really amazing group of people there, and it's called Come Crafting with Natasha. We have built up a very supportive and welcoming community over there, which I'm really grateful for. So I will leave a link down to that in the description box below, or you can just search on Facebook for Come Crafting with Natasha. And also I will leave any links to the products that I've used in the video. Some of these are no longer available, but honestly, have a look through your stash and I'm sure that you will be able to recreate lots of this using what you already have. On another note, I also wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who leaves comments on my videos. It's one of my favorite things to go through and read some of the comments, and I reply to as many as I possibly can. And if you've got any questions or anything, you can ask them down there and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you so much. I just really appreciate all of the support that everybody has for this channel. It has grown to something that I never ever thought it would. So thank you. I just thank you very much. I truly do appreciate it. Now, back to the card, we're just finishing it off. This card front is going down onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base, and that means that the card front panel is 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I've got my little trick here for lining it up, and I can pull out all of those tabs so it's really nicely lined up. And that is our card finish for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.